Welcome everybody. My name is Kimberly Kushner. I am a naturopath and clinical nutritionist. Now, this is just a short disclaimer that this presentation does not replace treatment provided by medical or allied health professionals. It is general advice, so please consult with your medical professional before commencing with any of the information provided. So, just a short introduction. I am Kimberly Kushner. I am a naturopath and clinical nutritionist specializing in care for women with endo. I have 13 years clinical experience and have personally journeyed with endo and adeno for 24 years. I'm a wife, a mom to 3 boys, and when I'm not helping women with reclaiming their lives from endometriosis, you'd usually find me in the kitchen because I am a foodie and I love food. Now, my family and I have recently moved from the Gold Coast up north to the beautiful coastal town in Yeppoon in central Queensland. So today I'm going to be covering 3 diet and lifestyle tips for strategies for managing endometriosis. We're going to explore how we can optimize omega fatty acid balance. We're going to explore a low histamine anti-inflammatory dietary approach, and we're going to talk about endocrine disruptors. So let's start with the omega imbalance problem. So the modern diet reality is that most people consume too much omega-6. Omega-6 is a pro-inflammatory fat or oil. We still need it because inflammation is an important part of, for example, healing in our body, but in excess, it drives too much inflammation. And on the flip side, we're eating too little omega-3, which is an anti-inflammatory fat. So this imbalance drives inflammation. Omega-6 is common in processed foods, vegetable oils, and grain-fed meat. So let's talk about the omega balance in a little more detail. So as mentioned earlier, omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. It helps to reduce pain. It supports hormonal balance, especially estrogen detoxification, which is absolutely crucial for endometriosis management. As mentioned, the excess and abundance of omega-6 intake creates a pro-inflammatory internal environment. So that increases inflammation and worsens pain, which also impacts hormonal balance by compromising healthy estrogen metabolism. So there is a number, and this number is your target ratio. This target ratio is the balance of omega-6 to omega-3, and ideally, it should be 3-to-1 or less. That means 3 times the omega-6 to omega-3. And the current average is actually 15-to-1, which is 5 times where we should be sitting. So I often see people with far more than that, but that is the average. Now, the benefits of optimal balance of omega-6 to omega-3 is that you get to reap the benefits of anti-inflammatory effects. It also supports healthy estrogen metabolism. It reduces oxidative stress. It can improve chronic pelvic pain. It enhances and improves circulation and supports overall hormone balance, as well as your mood and cognition, because omega-3s are such an important part of your central nervous system functioning. Now let's talk about some implementation strategies. Testing your essential fatty acids is something that I do routinely because it reveals that number that I mentioned earlier. It reveals your current omega ratios, which then guides your supplement and dietary needs, and it allows the tracking of your progress so we can see how you're going and if your levels are improving. So the goal is always to increase our omega-3 whilst reducing our omega-6, because by default, with the modernization of food, we are just eating an abundance of omega-6. So we can increase our omega-3 sources through food, and my favorite sources are fatty fish. So I don't know if you're a fan of fish, but I am, and these are the fish that are highest in your omega-3. So salmon, trout, mackerel, tuna, and sardines. However, due to the heavy metal accumulation in tuna, we always recommend just limiting it to about once a week. However, it is crucial to reduce your intake of ultra-processed foods because these ultra-processed foods contain a higher amount of your omega-6. So it's kind of snuck in everywhere. So this includes your vegetable oils, long-life food products, and shelf-stable baked goods. In clinic, I recommend taking an omega-3 with high polyphenols to protect omega-3s from oxidation because these omega-3s are extremely fragile and go rancid very easily. The polyphenols will protect it from going rancid and from going off. It also ensures proper cellular absorption because you can ensure that it's not going off in a short time and it's being transported to your cells for absorption. Plus, it's got that double anti-inflammatory effect where the omega-3s reduce inflammation and the polyphenols, so I use polyphenols from olives, which also provide an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effect. Now, it's very important to know that poor quality supplements can and worsen inflammation. So, for example, if you're taking rancid fish oil or a vegan version of fish oil would be like an algae oil. If it is rancid, it will feed inflammation. So that's important too. So moving on from our essential fatty acids, I want to talk about the histamine endometriosis connection. It's something that's gaining a lot of popularity and traction lately. And I just wanted to, cut through some of potentially anything that may be confusing anyone. So endometriosis is driven by inflammation and an immune dysfunction component. It's not purely a hormonal condition, and histamine plays a crucial role in all this. And you've got these cells which form part of your immune system called mast cells. And when these mast cells break down, they release histamine. These cells are abundant in your endometrial tissue. Now, estrogen activates these mast cells, which then release histamine. And histamine then triggers more estrogen production. So there's this ongoing vicious cycle where your estrogen will cause your mast cells to produce more histamine, to release more histamine, and then the histamine release triggers more estrogen production. So you can see how breaking that cycle can potentially assist with symptoms. Now, common symptoms that relate to histamine are painful periods, heavy periods, PMS, headaches, migraines, mood changes, and breast tenderness. Many of these we see in women with endo. Now, when looking at the diet, there are very high histamine foods that you can try minimizing. Now, anything aged and fermented will be high in histamine. So even foods that have been touted as like really healthy foods, and I'm not saying they're bad foods, it's just that if you have a histamine sensitivity, they could be a trigger to symptoms. So looking at things like kombucha, yogurt, sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, and aged cheeses. Leftover proteins are also something that accumulate quite a lot of histamine. Now, keeping meat in the fridge for a few days, that will accelerate the histamine production process. So there is a conversion of histidine to histamine. It's an amino acid kind of process. So proteins will accumulate higher histamine. Processed meats like your hams, for example. Alcohol is a big one. Caffeine, anything pickled and cured. Okay, so just think that the more aged something is, and if it's not fresh, it's going to naturally accumulate higher histamine. So very simply speaking, eating a low histamine diet involves fresh whole foods, fresh protein preparation, and simple food combinations. So you can just have low histamine veggies and meat or proteins that have been prepared freshly, and then some grains of some sort of carbohydrate. But I wanted to shine the spotlight on some of my favorite herbal medicines and nutrients, which I incorporate into a low histamine protocol. You may or may not have heard of these, but quercetin is one, and it's a bioflavonoid. It's an antioxidant, but it's a natural mast cell stabilizer. So referring back to the previous slide where I discussed the mast cells which break down and release histamine, quercetin helps to stabilize these mast cells to prevent excess breakdown. And then there's something called DAO. So DAO is the enzyme in your gut that helps to break down histamine. So histamine doesn't just kind of stay around in your system for excess periods of time. So DAO helps to break it down. Nettle tea is a beautiful tea that you can start incorporating into your in your diet regularly, which is also a natural histamine support. Black seed oil, another mast cell stabilizer. I often use the quercetin and the black seed oil together. Now, omega-3, I know we talked about it previously, but it's so good at reducing that inflammation. And the olive polyphenols, which I use alongside the omega-3. Now, there are two particularly that have been researched to help with histamine specifically, tyrosol and hydroxytyrosol. Act as mast cell stabilizers. So when I use a combo of your omega-3s with these specific polyphenols, you get the anti-inflammatory component and the histamine stabilizing. And if you couple that with a diet that is very nutritious, anti-inflammatory, and low in histamine, you can see how that can really potentially help with some of the symptoms. And the third thing I want to explore is endocrine disruptors. So, reducing our exposure to endocrine disruptors and how essential this is when dealing with endometriosis, because these are chemicals that we are exposed to constantly on an everyday basis. These are chemicals that act and mimic our hormones, and they drive up inflammation, and they age our cells, and they cause oxidative damage and stress and drive these pain pathways. So yes, they can affect endometriosis symptoms. In fact, there was an interesting study that looked at a generation of women who were exposed to dioxins, which was a predictive factor in granddaughters developing endometriosis. So it doesn't just affect us, but it can affect future generations and overall hormonal health. So endocrine disrupting chemicals hide in many, many places, but these are some of the most common places we see them. And where we're most commonly exposed to them is personal care products. So looking at makeups, moisturizers, shampoos, deodorants, kitchen items like plastic containers, non-stick cookware like Teflon, food packaging, and plastic water bottles. Now, I touched on their impact on our health, but they can disrupt our natural hormone balance. It can increase the estrogenic effects in our bodies by mimicking estrogen and creating a more potent estrogenic effect, which will then affect our endo symptoms. It adds to our overall toxic load and influences inflammation by upregulating those inflammatory pathways. Here are some practical tips for personal care. So I would recommend avoiding body products that contain phthalates, okay? Switch to low tox skincare product options as best as you can. And perfumes, you do not need them. Remove conventional perfumes. Organic cotton tampons and underwear. Now, that is important too. With regards to your home environment, I would recommend the first thing being replacing conventional cleaning products with non-toxic cleaning products. Okay, there are some very effective products out there which are not increasing your toxic load. Removing air fresheners, anything that is smelly and synthetic. Checking your laundry products and avoiding synthetic fragrances. Now, in the kitchen, using stainless steel water bottles instead of plastics. Avoid cooking with Teflon. So this is a process that can be done slowly. It doesn't need to be done all in a day. Just slowly start replacing items because I know it can be huge and overwhelming. So I recommend cast iron, stainless steel, or ceramic. Absolutely do not heat anything in the microwave in plastic, regardless of if it says microwave friendly or not. BPA isn't the only thing that is toxic when we're talking plastics. There is BPS as well and other toxins that act as endocrine disrupting chemicals. Choosing glass storage containers instead of plastics. And my tips are to start small. So choose one area to begin with. So, for example, if you're going to commit to the bathroom products and personal care products, start with that and then move to kitchen items and then move to cleaning and progress at your own pace. And I always recommend replace items as they run out. So, when you run out of, conventional cleaning product, get something that is low tox instead. And remember, every change counts. So I hope